My sister-in-law dropped my 9-year-old nephew off at my front door on a Tuesday evening in November, with nothing but a Spider-Man backpack and a look on her face that I still can't describe without feeling sick. "He eats basically anything," she said, already turning back toward her car. "Elliot's in Calgary until Friday. I just need a few days to myself. You don't mind?" It wasn't a question. She was halfway down my front walk before I could say a word. I watched her slide into the black BMW my brother had bought her last spring. The one she'd insisted on. The one he'd said yes to, because that's what my brother does. He says yes to the people he loves, and I remember thinking there was something strange about the way she moved. Too fast, too light, like someone who had just put down something heavy and was relieved to be free of it. The moment her taillights disappeared. Around the corner, my nephew tugged on my sleeve. He didn't cry. He didn't ask when he was going home. He just looked up at me with these dark, serious eyes that no 9-year-old should have, and he said very quietly, "Aunt Gwen, I found something hidden in my room. Mom put it there before she got really sick. She said I'd know when it was time to give it to somebody safe." He reached into the front pocket of his backpack and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. My hands were steady when I took it. My insides were not. "My name is Gwen. I'm 32 years old. I live in a semi-detached on a quiet street in Guelph, Ontario, and I work as a dental hygienist. Until that Tuesday evening, the biggest recurring drama in my life was whether to adopt a second cat. My life was small and calm, and I liked it that way. I had built it on purpose. My brother Elliot is 6 years older than me. He manages infrastructure projects for a telecom company, which means he spends about a third of each month in airports. He is a good man in a way that is very specific, loyal, steady, the type who texts our parents every Sunday regardless of what time zone he's in. 3 years ago, he lost his wife, Felix's mother, Carla, to ovarian cancer. She was 34 years old. Felix was 6. I loved Carla. She was warm and she was funny, and she made the best butter tarts at Christmas, and she was exactly the right person for my brother in every way that actually counts. Her death left a hole in our family. We are still learning to navigate around. About 14 months after Carla passed, Elliot met someone at a work conference in Vancouver. My sister-in-law, the current one, the one who had just left Felix on my porch like a package she no longer needed, had come into his life fast and bright, the kind of person who is designed to dazzle. She was charming at family dinners. She always brought good wine. She laughed at everyone's jokes and remembered the names of everyone's dogs. My parents loved her immediately and without reservation. I was slower. I had no specific reason I could point to. Just that instinct you get sometimes, like a door that looks fine, but doesn't quite hang right in the frame. They married 18 months ago. She became Felix's stepmother. She was never cruel to him, not that I ever witnessed directly, but she treated him the way you treat a piece of furniture you didn't choose but have to keep. Present. Functional. Not particularly noticed. Standing in my hallway that November night watching Felix carefully smooth the folded paper before handing it to me, I noticed the way he moved. Deliberate. Contained. Children his age are loose and careless with their bodies. They spill, they bump things, they take up space. Felix moved like someone who had spent a long time learning to be very still, very careful, and not take up too much. The note was written in Carla's handwriting. Round letters, the small heart she always drew instead of a dot over the lowercase. 8 lines, maybe. It told Felix that if anything at home ever felt very wrong, he should look in the lining of Stanley the bear. Felix looked at me. I looked at him. He unzipped the front compartment of his backpack and pulled out a stuffed grizzly that was worn soft from years of being carried everywhere. He held the bear out to me with both hands. Inside the lining, stitched into the seam with a small piece of Velcro, was a USB drive the size of my thumbnail. I made Felix a grilled cheese and real hot chocolate, the kind you make on the stove with actual milk and cocoa powder, not the powder packet, and I sat him at my kitchen table with his dinner while I opened my laptop. My fingers weren't shaking, but there was a narrowing at the edges of my vision, like my body was preparing itself before my brain had caught up. The USB drive was organized into 3 folders. That was so like Carla. Right up until the end, she was the most organized person I had ever known. The first folder held a scanned copy of her will. I had to read one clause 3 times before it settled. A lakefront cottage in Muskoka, which had been in Carla's family for 3 generations, was designated to be held in a protected trust for Felix until he turned 25. A property appraisal document in the second folder showed its current estimated value at $2.3 million. $2.3 million on a lake in cottage country, in a trust for a 9-year-old boy with a worn stuffed bear, and his mother's handwriting on a piece of folded paper. The second folder held the complete property documentation, the original deed, the trust designation signed by Carla and witnessed by 2 people, and a chain of correspondence with a Guelph estate lawyer named Moira Chen. Everything dated, everything in order. The third folder was labeled with just a date, last February. I sat very still for a moment with my cursor hovering over it. I almost didn't open it. I have this thing I do sometimes. I give people more benefit of the doubt than they've probably earned, because the alternative is too painful to sit with. I could have closed the laptop. I could have told myself there was an explanation. I could have waited until morning. I opened the folder. Audio files, 6 of them. The background sound on the first one was domestic. A coffee maker, maybe the hum of an exhaust fan. 2 voices. One of them I recognized before she'd finished her first sentence. The other was a man, a voice I didn't know. They were talking about the Muskoka property, about a transfer of title, about something called a numbered company, and about the window while Elliot's away in March. About a contact named Anton who apparently had connections at a private title services firm, and who knew how to move paperwork quickly and quietly. About how once a property transfer was registered with the Land Registry of Ontario, unwinding it, especially if it moved into a corporate structure, could take years of litigation. My sister-in-law said, at one point in the recording, in the same even tone she uses to discuss grocery lists, "The kid doesn't understand what any of it is worth. Carla always kept him out of the financial stuff." I sat at my kitchen table while my nephew fed pretend bites of grilled cheese crust to his bear 6 feet away from me, and I felt something settle in me that I can only describe as a door closing. Very gently, very firmly. The kind that locks from the inside. I picked up my phone and texted her. "Felix is great, just got him settled. Hope you get some rest." The thumbs up emoji came back in 40 seconds. I gave Felix a bath and read him 2 chapters of the diary of a wimpy kid he'd brought, and I sat on the edge of his bed in the spare room until his breathing slowed and he was fully out. Then I went back downstairs, made myself a coffee I wouldn't taste, and called the estate lawyer, whose name was in Carla's files. Moira Chen picked up on the 3rd ring at 9:47 in the evening. When I apologized for the hour, she said, "Don't," in a way that told me she was already paying full attention. I laid out the situation in as much order as I could manage and emailed her the documents and the audio files while we were still on the call. There was a pause while she reviewed them. I heard the soft percussion of typing. Then, "Okay, I need you to stay very calm because we have significantly less time than I'd like." Moira explained that a transfer of title application had already been filed with the Land Registry of Ontario, submitted, according to the application date, 5 days earlier. Under standard processing timelines, the transfer could be registered as early as Thursday morning. Once a title transfer was registered in Ontario, reversing it, even a fraudulent one, required a court order and could take months of proceedings, during which the property could be sold, mortgaged, or transferred again. "Can we stop it?" I asked. "We can file an emergency caution on the title," she said. It's a legal instrument that flags the property and freezes any pending registration while the matter is being disputed. But I need to file it tonight, and we need a court order supporting it by tomorrow afternoon, which means I'm calling a judge I know at home. And I need you in my office at 7 tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open and a legal pad beside me, and I listened to the audio files 3 more times, writing down timestamps and direct quotes. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I thought about Carla, about how she had known, about how in those last weeks, while she was still organized, still planning, still thinking about all the futures she wouldn't be present for, she had understood that she needed to leave something behind. Not a letter, not a phone call, not instructions to Elliot, who she probably knew would trust the wrong person when the grief finally lifted. A USB drive inside a stuffed bear, given to a 6-year-old with simple instructions. Find someone safe, and you'll know when. She had trusted her son to make that call, and he had made it correctly. At 2:15, I did the hardest thing I'd done all night. I called my brother. He answered on the second ring, groggy and immediately alarmed. I told him to find somewhere to sit down. I told him I was sorry, and then I told him. The silence on the other end was one of the worst sounds I have ever heard. Gwen. His voice had gone completely flat. You're saying that she. I know. Play me the recording. I held the phone speaker up to my laptop. We sat on the line together, my brother in a Calgary hotel room, and me in my kitchen in Guelph, and we listened. Another long silence. Then, I can't. The audio quality isn't great. Gwen, I can't just take your word that's her voice. She's my wife. You understand what it cost me to let someone in again after Carla. If you're wrong about this. I don't want to be right, I said. It was the truest sentence I'd spoken all night. I am asking you to please let me be wrong. But I need you to let Moira file the caution on the title tomorrow while we figure out whether I'm wrong. Because if I'm right and we wait, it won't matter what we figure out later. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. File it, he said. His voice was very controlled. But Gwen, if this turns out to be a misunderstanding, you have to tell me right away. I need you to promise me. I promise. Neither of us said goodbye. The line just went quiet. Moira's office was on Wyndham Street in a brick building that had a brass plate by the door and smelled like carpeting and serious work. I arrived at 6:55 with Felix asleep in the back seat and a thermos of coffee I'd made mostly out of habit. I'd stopped at a 24-hour Tim Hortons on the way for Felix's hot chocolate, which was sitting in the cup holder for when he woke up. Moira was already at her desk. She was a small, precise woman in her late 40s with reading glasses, pushed up into her hair, and the manner of someone who had been doing difficult things for a long time and had stopped being startled by them. She had spent most of the night working. The emergency caution application was prepared. A judge of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice had agreed to hear an urgent motion that afternoon. A favor I've been saving for something worth it, she said, in a tone that didn't invite discussion of what it had cost her. She slid a coffee across her desk toward me. I also sent the audio files to a forensic analyst I work with on fraud cases. I needed a preliminary authentication assessment. And he confirmed early this morning, no indicators of editing or tampering, and voice pattern analysis against available reference recordings is consistent. She's on file with your brother's insurance provider. Recorded customer service calls. I stared at her. I was thorough, she said simply. What I didn't anticipate was my sister-in-law walking in. I had been texting her through the morning, keeping up the fiction. Felix just woke up, having breakfast. All good. And she had been responding the way someone responds when they believe everything is proceeding exactly as planned. A thumbs up. A quick thank you again. You're the best. The performance of a woman who thought she had handed off the one obstacle between herself and $2.3 million. and would not see it again until the transfer was registered. At 11:15, while Felix was drawing at Moira's conference table, and Moira was on the phone with the court clerk, the front door of the office opened and my sister-in-law walked in. She was dressed the way she always dressed, perfectly, a camel coat that cost more than my bi-weekly pay, hair like she'd just come from a salon. She approached the front desk and asked for Moira Chen. Then she turned and saw me. What happened to her face was something I will remember for the rest of my life. There was a fraction of a second, just a fraction, where it went completely blank. The mask dropped straight down, no transition, so slide. Just there and then not there. And then the smile came back, even wider, and she said, "Gwen, what are you doing here?" I said nothing. She looked past me at the conference table, and her gaze landed on Stanley the bear sitting beside Felix's drawings, and I watched her understand. Her eyes moved from the bear to Felix to me, and whatever she'd been calculating in the 3 steps across that lobby collapsed. She turned for the door. Her hand was on the handle when Moira's receptionist said, very calmly, that Detective Constable Friesen from the Guelph Police Service was on his way over, and would appreciate it if everyone remained on the premises. She stayed. The court hearing that afternoon lasted 40 minutes. Her hastily retained lawyer, someone she'd apparently called from the parking lot while the receptionist was still speaking, tried to argue that the title transfer was a legitimate estate management measure that my brother had been made aware of. He used the words family planning with the particular confidence of someone who believes a good suit can carry an argument most of the way. Moira submitted the audio recordings into the record. She submitted the forensic authentication report. She submitted a letter from the Financial Crimes Unit confirming they had opened a file that morning based on our complaint, and had already obtained transaction records from the title services firm. My sister-in-law's lawyer stopped talking. The judge issued an emergency order blocking the title transfer, froze all pending applications related to the Muskoka property, and referred the matter to the Crown for charges under the criminal code. Anton, the man on the recordings, her accomplice, was picked up at a hotel in Mississauga that same evening. By the following morning, according to what Moira relayed to me, he had retained separate counsel and was providing investigators with a detailed account of the scheme. In his account, he was merely the facilitator. Everything had been her idea from the beginning. I wasn't surprised. That's how these things work. People like that find someone useful and hold on until the wait becomes inconvenient, and then they let go of the rope. Elliot flew back from Calgary that night. He landed at Pearson at 10:40 and took a cab directly to my house, and he knocked on my door just before midnight. I let him in and we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Felix had smoothed out his mother's note, where I had opened the USB drive, where I had made the calls. And my brother cried for a long time without speaking. I didn't try to fill the silence. Sometimes silence is what there is, and the only correct thing is to stay in it with someone. Eventually, he said, she was going to sell the Muskoka cottage. His voice was barely above a breath. Carla's family's cottage. Felix's cottage. She didn't get it, I said. It's his. It's going to stay his. He looked at me across the table, red-eyed and exhausted, and something in him fractured and trying to reorient. How did you know? He said. Most people would have thought. A kid, a stuffed bear, a USB drive. Most people would have called me first and waited until morning. I thought about it honestly. Carla trusted him, I said. That was enough for me. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, with a lot of paperwork and waiting, and then sudden movements forward. The charges were filed. The property remained in trust, a corporate trustee firm appointed by the court to administer it until Felix reaches 25. $2.3 million, sitting on the edge of a Muskoka lake, exactly where Carla left it. Elliot filed for divorce the week after the court order. He told me he didn't deliberate long. He said, when she walked into Moira's office, and her first instinct was to pretend he knew. Innocent people explain. They don't perform. He'd spent enough of his life around honest people to know the difference. Felix stayed with me for 3 weeks while Elliot reorganized his life. 3 weeks of school lunches packed the night before, and early Saturday mornings at the arena for hockey practice. And entirely too many episodes of a Pokemon cartoon I still cannot follow the logic of and cooking dinner. Together with Felix standing on a step stool beside the stove, stirring things with complete seriousness like it was a professional responsibility. He's a funny kid, careful and clever, and a little older than his age in the ways that cost something to notice. But he laughs. He laughs a lot, once he understands it's safe to. On his last night before Elliot picked him up, Felix sat across from me at dinner, pasta carbonara, his choice, and said, the way kids say things that land heavier than they intend. Mom always told me if things got really bad, Aunt Gwen was who to go to. I put my fork down. She said that? He nodded, already back to twisting his pasta. She said you didn't panic, and you didn't lie. She said those were the two most important things about a person. I didn't respond right away. I was looking at this boy who had carried his mother's secret for 3 years, who had waited with a patience that wasn't natural for his age, who had made a judgment call about when and who, and then placed everything he had into my hands with complete quiet certainty. Your mom was really smart, I said. I know, he said. She knew things about people. I think about Carla often now. About the Velcro seal she sewed into Stanley's lining. About the note written at a reading level Felix could manage. About the way she thought through every detail, the hiding place, the right words, the right person, while she was dying, and she still got every single piece of it exactly right. She planned for the worst so her son could survive it. And the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I can't quite put down, is this. She trusted Felix to know. Not an adult, not a lawyer, not a relative, not a system. Her 6-year-old, who she believed would grow into someone who could read a situation and make the right call. He did, he absolutely did. Standing up to my sister-in-law, calling a lawyer at 10 o'clock at night, sitting across from a judge, writing down timestamps at 2 in the morning, was the most frightened I have ever been while simultaneously being the most certain. Those two things lived in me at the same time, through all of it, somehow without canceling each other out. I would do it again. I would do it without deliberating for a single second. A 9-year-old boy handed me a USB drive inside a stuffed bear and told me his mom said it was the right time. That's all it took. That's all it should take. Family isn't who shares your last name or shows up in the photographs. It's the woman who spent her last organized weeks sewing Velcro into a bear's lining and writing a note in careful round letters, with little hearts over the eyes, trusting the right people to be exactly who she knew they were. And it's the person who, when the bear gets passed to them, picks up the phone. What would you have done if someone you loved had trusted you with something that important? If a child that small had placed that kind of weight in your hands, would you have acted, or would you have waited to be more certain? I'd really love to hear from you in the comments below.